Hey everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad Gustafson and I share two books that we love and we think you should read. When, Brad?
Right now, people, don't delay. Otherwise, we'll send Lego TIE fighters after you.
That sounds really not threatening, I have to say.
I'm just trying to keep up with your amazing backdrops. If this doesn't do it, I got nothing. So
I don't have any cool Legos in my backdrop.
You don't need, trust me, you don't need Legos. You got everything else.
How are you, my friend?
So good, Jen. Summer is such a great time of year to read extra. It just seems like the pacing of things, you can stay up a little later, or at least I stay up a little later. So it's good. It's good. How about you?
Same here. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about how over the last few weeks, I've just been reading what I really wanted to read, as opposed to feeling like I need to read so that I know what book to recommend to what audience, like reading for my own pleasure. And I think that's a summer thing too for educators as well, to really focus on our own reading joy.
For sure. I saw someone tweeted me or whatever they call it on Twitter and said, what teacher PD books would you recommend for teachers or something like that? Mm-hmm. And my response, and hopefully a positive tone came through because I wasn't intending to be snarky, but I said something like, or what would I recommend for teachers? Choice and reading for pleasure. So instead of listing titles, it's like whatever they want to read. Exactly. I know that's probably not the most academic answer, but
no, I'm with you. I feel like we spend a lot of time teaching kids, like how to read, but sometimes we forget to teach them how to be a reader, and that it requires us to know how to be a reader ourselves, to feed and fuel our own reading lives. We got to do that ourselves. Yeah. So, well, speaking of which, what you've been reading this week?
Oh, bummer. I always like when I always get fired up when I listen to you, but I do have a book for us. So this one is really cool. If you could picture in your mind a Jetson, the cartoon, the Jetsons with the spaceships flying all over. Yeah. That's the image I had, but except instead of spaceships, picture dragons. Okay, dragons. So it's a city of the future, and dragons have been, for lack of a better word, domesticated, although they're still fierce and powerful and stuff, but they're used, or maybe like the Flintstones used to use dinosaurs. That's kind of how dragons are. So they're taxi cabs, they're all these things. But here's the other thing. Gangs have also tapped into the power of dragons for battling and power purposes. And of course, law enforcement and government uses them too. So all in this world, our main character, Abel, he is an avid dragon connoisseur. He doesn't know how to ride them. He's never touched one, nothing like that, but he studies them like on kind of football cards. He knows all the dragon games and the stats and the power levels, and there's all different kinds of dragons and things they can do, and kind of like Pokemon. But here's where the story gets good and kind of where it takes off. So one night, and by the way, every night at midnight in the future, there's a certain kind of dragon that can incinerate garbage. Like they'll fly over the sky at midnight, and everyone knows, go inside, and they have dragon-proof windows and heat shields over their homes, but the dragons clean up the city. So Abel looks out his window and he sees this, it's approaching midnight, so he can't really see what's happening, but someone is jumping from balcony to balcony, building to building, and it's like a minute to midnight. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is not good. And the person's like getting closer and closer to his room window, and then eventually trying to get in with seconds left before midnight. And, obviously, what happens at midnight, the person's not going to make it. Well, he lets the person in because he realizes it's his sister. So many questions, like, A, what are you doing outside? But he comes to realize she's being chased or fearing for her life. Hence the reason she was acting so peculiar. She gives him an address and a code or a key, and then leaves and just says like very scant or sparse directions. And it's just all a big mystery. And he's like, what is going on? He just knows people are after her. So as the story progresses just a little bit, Abel comes to realize his sister is in big trouble with these gangs. She's a dragon thief. She stole a dragon, and that's where the story really takes off. It's by Alex London. It's called Battle Dragons, and it is epically good. And the gangs come to her and her family. They crash in the living room and kind of turn the place upside down, searching for her. And they know she took the dragon, and Abel's family is the only link to her, even though she's kind of like a ghost in the wind at this point. But just really, really epic scenes and imagery and battles of dragons. And the craziest thing happens in the story that's kind of a launching point. It's Abel, as I said earlier, actually he failed his dragon exam, so he can never have contact with dragons or be a dragon rider. Well, he went to this address with the key that his sister gave, snuck in against his character, and there was this massive, valuable, one of the most powerful dragons in there. And he doesn't, well, he knows a lot academically about them, and he knows to give them reverence and treat them with respect and honor, which not everyone does. And therefore this dragon that was stolen bonded with him. So he became inseparable from it, even though he had no clue how to pilot it. He just knew all the academics behind it. And that put him in a really tough position in between lots and lots of gangs, because now he's bonded to this stolen dragon. No one else can really ride the thing. He has a respect for it, but it creates it's just ridiculously good. Now, this one will be one you'll have to add to your queue, if you will. It comes out in September, but definitely worth writing down and keeping an eye out for. It's just an epic, futuristic, and I guess maybe sci-fi fantasy, but I think it'd be, I love all sci-fi and fantasy, I think. But I think this is one that the masses will appreciate, whether it's a dragon lover, or there's so many different reasons to love this book. It's not super niche, I don't think. So for all of those reasons and more, people, read this now. Add this one to your queue right now.
Now, I haven't read that one, but I think of Alex London books as these like high octane, fast paced adventures for kids that really, you get swooped up in the story and it's hard to let go because there's lots of action. It sounds like that one is too.
Lots of action and power and edge of your seat, like, because the stakes are so high as all these forces. It's not a unidimensional issue, it's lots of different warring factions and different gangs with different personalities and things like that. And it's not, how do I say it? There's also like a lighter aspect. Like one of the gangs in this city is more of like a prank type gang where they play jokes and leave tags just to kind of create havoc, not necessarily for other reasons. So there's different personalities to each gang, which creates some really interesting storylines and opportunities and wrinkles. So good stuff.
Wow. My dog's real excited in the background. You can hear him barking some enthusiasm. That's awesome. That sounds great. I love it. I feel, let me ask you this, it look like from the title that it might be one of a series? Does it indicate that there's going to be more?
Such a good question. I don't know. I really hope it is. It's not one of those books, I don't think, that's cheesily, or how some movies, they're so obvious at the ending, like they made the movie to do another one. This book could be another, like a series, a really great epic series, but it wasn't constructed in a way where it didn't have all the things you love in a standalone book. So I hope that Alex does that, but I don't know.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. That cover looks amazing. Wow. Wow, awesome. Well,
I can hardly wait, Jen. Is there a tie-in this week? Because dragons might be kind of a hard thing to connect to. What do you got for us?
Not a tie-in for dragons, but there is a tie-in in terms of one. I'll be totally transparent. One of the reasons I asked if it was a series is because recently I've been reading a lot of like second or third in a series that I've started because, like I said, the summer is often a good time for me to just catch up on reading that's just purely for me, where I'm not thinking about who I might recommend the book to. And so I've been doing that recently, and I think this might be the very first time ever that I'm going to book talk a second in a series on Read This Now. I never do that, but I'm so in love with this book and this world and with this author that I just can't stop like feeling like when you read, first of all, there are some authors whose writing is so familiar to you, like you love so much that when you first turn that page and start reading their book, it's like reconnecting with an old friend, because you just recognize there's like something comforting in that, and also exhilarating. You're like, oh yes, I know this person, I know their writing. And Maggie Stiefvater is one of those writers for me. I've read everything she's ever released, and I just am such a super fan of her writing. And you and I have talked about before that I want the Raven Boy series, that series of books is one of my very favorite series, period, of all time. I've reread those books a number of times, and I just love those characters. But right now I'm in the middle of a spin-off series, the Dreamer series, which is a spin-off of the Raven Boys, which centers around one of the characters from that first series, named Ronan Lynch, who's one of my favorite characters in the first series. And Ronan has a unique power. He is known as a dreamer, and not in the way that you and I might think of dreamers, but as dreamers in this universe are people who are able to dream things into life. So if you're a dreamer and you go to sleep and you dream of a fancy sports car, it's possible, if you're able to control your power, to bring that fancy sports car into the world, dream it into life, which sounds kind of awesome, right? Until you start, until you start thinking about all the ways that it could go wrong. Because
Jen, what could go wrong about commuting to work in a TIE fighter?
Well, what if the version that you dream of unintentionally spews noxic gas that kills people? What if the version of the TIE fighter that you dream of unintentionally has some alien force on board that comes out and wants to destroy the world? All of these things, if you're not fully in control of your dream and understand every aspect of the thing you're dreaming of, you bring it into the waking world, it can wreak havoc. And one of the things that can be dreamt and brought into the human world are people. If you are dreaming of a person and you're not very careful, you can bring that person to life in the real world. For example, Ronan, when he was very young and couldn't control his dreams, desperately wanted a younger brother who was as loving and gentle as Ronan is sharp and abrasive. He sort of wanted a younger brother that was the opposite to him. And he dreamt his younger brother, Matthew, to life. And while that might seem like a cool thing, one of the consequences that exists for dreamers is that anything that they dream, if something happens to the dreamer, everything that they dream falls asleep forever. So like there's a scene, they own a farm out in the Virginia woods with pastures that are full of sleeping cows because they were dreamt by Ronan's father, who's no longer alive, right? So there's all these consequences to being a dreamer. And their power is kind of hinged to this force known as the ley line, which runs through these primordial forests around the world. And as human development encroaches on the natural world, the ley line becomes weaker and weaker and weaker, which then interrupts and diminishes and weakens the power of the dreamers, which then puts everything that they've ever dreamt, including humans like Matthew and lots of other people, at risk. Because if something happens to the dreamer, then all of their dreams also die. Okay, so that is sort of Ronan's journey, trying to figure out how he and other dreamers can try to re-strengthen the ley line. But at the same time, there's a group of mercenaries who believe that the dreamers are evil and bound to destroy the world. These people are called the moderators. They call dreamers the Zeds, and their mission is to find dreamers and kill them. And so in Mr. Impossible, which is the second book in the Dreamer trilogy, Ronan, who you can see here, who has partnered with another dreamer named Jordan here, are searching for a way to strengthen the ley line so that they can keep both themselves and the people and the dreams that they've brought into the world alive, while also trying to avoid the moderators whose entire mission is to find and destroy them. So it's fast-paced, but also, if you've read anything, anybody who's watching this, if you've read anything by Maggie Stiefvater, then you know that it's also a beautifully written and stunning. And one of the reasons I chose to book talk it today, even though it is a sequel, it's the second in what's going to be a trilogy, is because the ending does leave you wanting to know what happens next. But in a way, this book could stand alone if you only read this and none of the others, although I don't know why you would. It could still be very satisfying. So it's called Mr. Impossible, and it's by Maggie Stiefvater, and I love it so much, and I think you should read it right now.
I'm hooked, Jen. It reminds me a lot of Castor, except dreams, magic. So I book talked Castor maybe a year ago. You might like Castor just based on that, or at least I'd be curious to hear your impressions to see how, I don't know, similar there.
It's these types of books, as I'm sure is true with the one that you book talk, both Castor and the one today, there's multiple plot lines going on, like I told the book talk based really on Ronan's perspective, but there's lots of other characters and people who are in one of what I think is the mark of a great sort of, I don't know if it's fantasy, but like fast-paced book, is that you have all these forces sort of careening towards each other in pursuit of what they think are different goals. But as a reader, you can see how their worlds are going to collide, and how dependent they are on each other without really knowing it. And the other piece of this book that I will just share really quickly is that Ronan and his friends understand that they have to keep the ley line healthy and alive in order to keep themselves out healthy and alive. But there's also a group of people who seem to have developed another way to keep dreamers alive, and that way involves art. And there are so many references to galleries and specific works of art as a certain group of people travel the world trying to figure out what it is about these particular pieces of art that might keep dreamer and the dreamed alive. And it's fascinating. I just love it. I could talk about it forever. But
it is fascinating. Super quick question. Have the Zed thought that they just can go like kill off or destroy the ley line, or is that a bad idea?
No, well, I don't think that, number one, the ley line runs throughout the entire world. So you'd have to kill off every forest on the planet to kill off the ley line. Yeah. And also, I'm not sure if the moderators understand that it's the ley line that is fueling that. They know it's something, but I don't know that they could name it as the ley line,
Got it. Okay. Very cool.
Anyway,
amazing as always.
It's so great. Well, okay. So we could sit here and chat about this forever, but I'm sure our 3.5 viewers want to spend at least some time looking through our archive and all of the rest of our recommendations. Where should they go to do that, Brad?
Yeah, the archives are a repository of book talk goodness and ideas. It's bit.ly/read_this_now.
Woo! Thank you, my friend. Have a great week and happy reading, everyone.